right, so looking at our first problem, 5m squared minus 2m minus 7. We look to see if there is a greatest common factor among all three terms. There is not. And then I do see that I have a trinomial. And so when I have a trinomial, the first thing I do is take and multiply those, the a times the c, to get a negative 35m squared. And then multiply or add the negative 2m. So what this tells me is that I am looking for two numbers that multiply to a negative 35 and add to a negative 2. And so if I need to go ahead and write the factors out, I can. But what I'm really looking for is to know that this is going to be one positive and one negative, because if I multiply that together, that will give me a negative. And I need the factors to sum to negative 2. And so that is going to be a negative 7 and a positive 5. Because if I multiply a negative 7 times a positive 5, that gives me negative 35. If I add those together, it gives me a negative 2. We then said what we do is we take our trinomial and we create 4 terms. And we create 4 terms using the following process. We take and we write down the first term, and we write down the last term. And now we do this process called split the middle, which means we take this middle term and we actually split it into 2 parts. What 2 parts are the parts that we found over here. And so for this particular one, we're going to write negative minus 7m and then plus 5m. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. And now we're just going to go do our grouping process. That's how we handled 4 terms before. That's how we'll handle them now. So we're going to take 4 terms and create 2 groups of 2. I'm going to look at that first group and determine what the greatest common factor is, and that would be an m. And I'm going to factor out an m. I'm going to look at the second group and between 5m and 7, the only thing it's going to be in common is going to be a 1. And that 1 will be positive. And then I'm going to create my answer. My answer is created by this common factor here, which gives me 5m minus 7. And then my second factor is created from the 2 greatest common factors of the groups. So we had our first group here and our second greatest common factor there. And so that will give us m plus 1. Okay. If we look at number 2, the first thing I do is look all the way across to see if there is a GCF. There is not. So I'm going to take and multiply the A term times the C term. And that is going to give us a 45x squared positive. And then the B term goes here. So this tells me I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 45 that add to 14. So I kind of luck out with 45, not a lot of factors, 1 and 45, 9 and 5, and 9 and 5 we should be able to identify pretty quickly, multiply to 45, and then are going to add to 14. And so now I'm going to start that process of split the middle. I'm going to take my first term and drop it down. I'm going to take my last term and drop it down. and we split the middle term into two parts. That's where what we're doing. We're taking a trinomial, 3 terms, and moving it into 4 terms. And so this will be a 9x plus 5x. Now once I do that, I see 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. And so now we are back to grouping. So when we take 4 terms, we group the first 2 terms together, and we take out the GCF of the first group. And then we take out the GCF of the second group, which is a positive 5. And then we go to write our answer. If we look here, here's our common factor. That's our one answer. And then our other answer is created from the GCFs of the first group and the GCF of the second group. So we have x and then plus 5. If we look at number 3, we look all the way across and see if there's a greatest common factor. And in this particular problem, there is. So the first thing I notice is that I can take and divide everything by 3. And so that will leave me with 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. Now, as we've seen before, sometimes this is the only type of factoring that can occur, but I'm going to see if what is inside the parentheses here can factor further. And so I'm going to take that 3 and drop it down, and then I'm going to get 2 parentheses ready in case it does factor even further. And so now I'm going to look at multiplying the a times the c term, and that would give me 10x squared, and the middle term is 11x. We kind of luck out here with this one too, that if we look at the factors of 10, that's either 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. And since we need to make an 11, that is going to give us 10x times 1x. And so now I'm going to take and start that process of split the middle. I'm going to drop the first term down. I'm going to drop the last term down. And then I'm going to split up the middle term into 10x and 1x. And then what I notice is I have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms here. And so I'm going to take those 4 terms and group them into 2 groups. Then I'm going to look at the greatest common factor of the first group, which happens to be a 2x. And then the greatest common factor of this second group, which happens to just be a 1, a positive 1. And then what I notice is that as I go to create my answer here, there's my factor that's in common. And then my second answer is going to be created by the greatest common factor of the first group and the second group. And that is going to give me a 2x plus 1.